Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello and welcome to the show. Cannon Carr here alongside Claudia Bettinger, our producer. Claudia, we have a great show today. I just love it. This one is all about taking what's really a strong existing product in the R&D phase and building a business around it from scratch. And it's a great journey, and we'll get into it. But why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, today we have Jesslyn Rollins, who's the CEO of BioLite, which is a family-owned business that grew out of the IV in a bottle that her dad created. She went from selling it out of her Toyota Highlander, and now 7 years later, they have over $22 million in annual revenue, and they continue to grow. It's
a great story. You know, it's 7 years of incredible business and personal growth that you'll enjoy hearing about. As you listen to the program, keep three things in mind. One, listen to how Jesslyn talks about constantly in this whole journey about being in tune with what the market wants. While it's a great product, she and the business are not enamored with the product. Mm-hmm. It's all about solving a problem in the marketplace. And that's so important for entrepreneurs to keep in mind. Second, this is a playbook about how they build a business around a product from scratch. And Jesslyn will walk you through her version of that playbook. And it's really insightful. And third, listen to the mindset of Jesslyn, who has earned the position of being the leader of the business of her family business without any formal training, relatively young, but her mindset is kind of the key to how she does that. And, you know, it's not easy to do, right? But you can do it, and she shows you how. So this is a great episode. Sit back and listen to the story with Jesslyn Rollins. Jesslyn, thanks for joining the program. We've got such an exciting story to talk about today, but I did want to just take you back to those early days back in school, back in your early career. Did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur and as a CEO of the family business?
No, God, no. So there was no thought in anybody's mind, including every single member of my family, that we were going to have a family business. Mm-hmm. So my dad was a 8 to 6 physician, and my mom was a very dedicated mother. And Dad always hated that his medical practice couldn't be passed down to me and my sisters if we were ever interested. So no, this was not a thought. I majored in soft skills at the University of Georgia. I was a theater major, communication studies major with a minor in human development. And I had a lot of lessons and classes on how people relate in many different scenarios. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to go into theater professionally. I didn't know if I wanted to go into some type of arts professionally, but business never crossed my mind. And back then, business was like a dirty word because it meant numbers and black and white things and not fun things. And that just wasn't something that I thought I was interested in until I got out into the real world and BioLite became a thing, and I took to it like a duck to water.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get into that. So, but you before you came into the family business, I know you spent a little time as a recruiter. I think you also tried to make it on the comedy circuit in comedy clubs. How did you transition into what you're doing?
So yeah, you're absolutely right. So first job out of college, I was a recruiter in a startup. And then second job, I was actually an actress. It was my first professional play. I was Ado Annie in Oklahoma, up in North Carolina. And then the next one, I thought I wanted to go into stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. So that dream died in about 20 minutes when I took my first comedy class and realized that I had no raw talent for that.
Good to learn that early, right? Yeah.
Oh my God, very quickly. And so the guy that was running the comedy club was like, yeah, no, you're not funny, but we think you could be great at customer service. So I started checking in tickets at the Laughing Skull Comedy Lounge. And that's when Dad approached me about BioLite. And that's been what I've been doing ever since. That was about 2016 going into 2017.
Well, and just final part on that. I mean, so just sidebar, but as you fast forward into what you're doing now, did that training actually help in customer service and recruiting and thinking on your feet? I mean, did it help, and how?
Oh my gosh. So absolutely. So the job at the comedy club was so helpful because not only was I having to count money and get better, sharpen those number skills, but the most important thing was that after everybody was checked in, I got to sit in the audience and watch these comics. And I got really good at identifying who was going to be able to be successful at this as a career. And so being able to identify talent and the soft skills necessary to be successful, and that really plays into the recruiting piece as well. I learned a lot through that, and that has helped me tremendously with finding the right people along the journey to make BioLite successful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to come back to that because there's some real nuggets in there that are awesome. So, but it's all right. So 2016, there was a product called, I don't even know if it was called BioLite at the time, but your dad had basically invented a product. Tell us a little bit about, why he developed it, and then, how you started getting involved selling it, basically.
Yeah. So my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And when she was going through her chemo treatments, she was so sick and so dehydrated that she kept having to get IV bags before treatments. And my family was really struggling to help her get the proper treatment that she needed because dehydration was really holding her back. So my dad is a board certified anesthesiologist and pain specialist. He's got years of experience tailoring his own patients' IV bags with nutritional supplementation to help them feel better. So when my family was trying sports drinks, children's rehydration products, electrolyte powders, and none of those products were keeping her hydrated enough for treatments, my dad used his experience to create a product that would put the IV in a bottle that somebody could drink. And then he added ingredients into it that would help with cleaning out your liver and help with nausea, common side effects of chemo. So that was the inspiration for the product. And I was actually not involved at all in the formulation of the product. Thank God. You don't want a theater major,
doing that
around that. So Dad really spearheaded that, but he's very inventive. He's always had a notebook of inventions, but really that was it. He had put an initial investment of about $2 million to get this thing actually bottled and taste good and ready to go on the shelves. But when it came to a business plan and what to do once the product arrived, he didn't have that next step. And he was out of money, and rightfully so. That was a large chunk. And he was like, Jesslyn, so your comedy career is not going anywhere. I have this product that I've created. Would you be interested in helping me sell this thing? And I was so blown away by why the product was created, what the product was supposed to do, who it was supposed to help, that I latched onto this thing from day one and was so excited about it. But I was very nervous that, of course, I wanted this thing to work. I wanted my dad's product to be successful. And so I knew that I had a lot of internal bias on the product itself. So what I did initially, I'm Atlanta born and raised, 5th generation, very proud of that. I actually dropped samples off at local high schools. Love It, Pace, Holy Innocents, Blessed Trinity. And I just started to get overwhelming positive feedback. At Love It, for example, they had 10 football players that habitually cramped. And when they gave BioLite to those players, one bottle of BioLite before the game and one at halftime, 9 of them did not cramp at all. So that feedback and that success and those stories of success really kept those wheels turning and in the early years.
Yeah. Well, so it sounded like your dad, he invested a lot of capital in. So he wanted this to be a business. I mean, he built it at first for your mom, but it sounds like creative. So he realized there was something bigger than just a one person application, right? So he invested to build a business, just didn't know how to build it. And so he's like, okay, so see what you can take here.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's been Dad's whole thing. Like if he was on the podcast with us, he would be like, oh my, like he would say, oh my God, like, you know, not only is this not just for Janine, my wife, this is for people that are extreme athletes, exhausted new parents, people that are traveling all over the place and feel super run down. Like an IV in a bottle doesn't just play in the healthcare realm. It is so beneficial because healthcare is really life care. And so he automatically knew the patient profiles that this could help. And it really was more of just like, how do you start? Where do you go from here? Who do we contact first? Because you you got the opportunity to grow into, which is the purpose of this podcast. And beyond the purpose of this podcast, but how did it take a while to pass all the regulatory requirements to have a almost medicinal type drink, or is that something your dad was already good at and kind of accelerated through that product development? So Dad would tell you that it didn't take him very long to come up with the formula. He already knew it because he'd been doing it for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
What was challenging was creating a product that's an IV in a bottle with all these helpful ingredients that actually tasted good. That took 4 years.
4 years. Yeah. So, and taste was an important part, I guess, right? Because it's got
Well, I mean, if you're in the beverage industry, you understand that taste is everything. If people don't like the taste of your product, they're not going to buy it again.
Yeah.
So having something that is medicinal and does taste good was a huge speed bump.
Has the product its composition had to evolve, or is it still what it was after that first 4 years and you haven't really even had to evolve it?
No, so it's interesting. So in the early years, so in 2017, 2018, I did close to 200 samplings in stores with customers. And it was phenomenal because I got feedback directly from customers on what they liked, what they didn't like. And I would take that feedback and come back with Dad, and he would make tweaks here and there. But the original formulation that he rolled out, I would say 90% of what the product started with is what it is today. But based on that customer feedback, we would make those tweaks.
So your dad had a product. So when you walked in, you were basically tasked with figuring out, is this viable in a business sense, right? Can we grow this? And it sounded like 200 taste tests. I mean, you got direct customer feedback. And how long did that take before you said, hey, we've got enough of a viable product to where we can start scaling this?
So it's not one step. I mean, it is one step after the other, but it's not as linear as that. So started selling to high schools. Then I had a meeting. It was like a family get together with my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law was like, Jesslyn, I know you're having a lot of success with these high school football teams. Really admire you selling it out of the back of your Toyota Highlander. But this isn't how beverage works. If you want to get it to a lot of people all at once, you need to get it into retail. And to get it into retail, you need a distributor to get it into retail. And so to kind of speed that story up, we had an intro with a local beverage distributor in Atlanta called Savannah Distributing.
Mhm.
Savannah Distributing didn't feel comfortable with us only having high school football teams and a few local independent pharmacies and convenience stores. They needed, and in the beverage world, you really need like a chain to anchor the business and to make it make sense for them to pick up your product.
Mhm.
So they introduced me to Kroger,
Mhm.
and the Kroger division for Atlanta, which covers Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina. And I sold it into Kroger. They didn't think I was going to be able to do that.
Mhm.
You know, there's a little part of me that thought I wasn't going to be able to do that,
Right.
but I did. And it was getting into Kroger and watching the numbers climb in Kroger.
Mhm.
That was like, okay, I think we actually have something here. Okay, so it's typical that the threshold for a sports drink, let's just call it sports drinks, is like what keeps you in the store is around like 7 bottles per month or something.
Mhm.
We were doing way more than double that.
You mean you need to sell 7 bottles a month in order to be, is that what you said? To be
No. It's 7 bottles a week.
a week. Yeah. All right. So
Yeah.
Michelle's got to move 7 bottles a week to be kind of on
You
the radar.
gotta
Okay.
move. You gotta move. And we were doing well above that. And it's so great that we didn't have any expectations of
Mhm.
what to sell, because there wasn't really any pressure. Like my dad wasn't applying any pressure that this had to be successful. And
Mhm.
that allowed us the freedom to test and try and see and not know and do it anyway. And
Mhm.
it just started to climb. And that's
Let's
when
go
we
back.
really got an understanding that we had something.
So that was that aha moment where you realized it. But take us just for a moment. You said you didn't think Kroger would necessarily buy it, right? I mean,
No.
I assume sports drinks, if the broad category is crowded, right? Does Kroger need another sports drink? How did you get their attention? What was the hook?
Okay, so what was the hook? So Randy Waters, who was the head of the all natural division at the time, I went through my whole presentation talking to him about the evolution of hydration. And I actually had the evolution of man. And then I associated water and sports drinks underneath it, with BioLite
All right.
being the fully developed human.
Pretty
And
good
I was
story.
like,
All
this
right.
is where this is going. This is what this product is, all the things. And we had been in business at that time, like probably like business in quotations, probably around 9 months at that point. So we were still testing and trying and, not really knowing what we were doing. But what Randy said sold him was my passion and my enthusiasm for the product. Because he said, he was like, listen, 99% of water companies I turn down,
Mhm.
but your passion, your enthusiasm, this thing is going places. And
Mhm.
that tells
So he
you
invested in
everything.
you.
He invested in me. And
Yeah.
and that's really what you really need to take from that story, is that Randy didn't understand what the product was, because BioLite's not a water.
Right.
He
You
was
said
like, but
water,
your
and I thought he was
passion.
just yeah.
No, he like straight up didn't get it. And he
Yeah.
was like, but your passion, your enthusiasm, this thing is going places. But
Right.
okay, so that's enough, pat Jesslyn on the back.
Yeah.
There was another piece of this where there was an outside force that nobody had control over that played into our favor. So Savannah Distributing, this specific distributor, had coolers in Kroger.
Mhm.
And they had a product that was a kombucha product that was not shelf stable. And by shelf stable, I mean refrigerator stable. The ingredients and the mix of carbonation was potentially hazardous, because it was exploding. Not potentially, it was hazardous because it was exploding in stores.
Got it.
So they had taken that off of the shelves, and there was a gap in those coolers.
So timing is everything in some sense too, right?
Timing is everything. Timing is so much of it. but it, so the addition of that opening, passion and enthusiasm, decent product that he kind of understood, in his mind, it's a phenomenal product. That's what got us in.
Yeah, that is an awesome story. So, all right, well, so fast forward then. So you achieved that big sale. You helped validate it. Now the question is, ultimately, where do you take this business? And on paper, you're not a CEO background trained person. So what when you looked and said, all right, so now we've got some momentum here. What were those next few steps you took to build out something? What did you do next deliberately?
The next steps were hiring the right people. So at this time, when we got into Kroger, because Savannah Distributing has, I don't know how many employees they have, but like 50 to 100. So our operation from the outside looked a heck of a lot bigger than just one little lady. So but when it came to getting the product to Savannah Distributing, when it came to getting the product out into the world, it was still me. And I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm also bad at a couple of things and at a lot of things. And the number one thing that I needed help on was logistics. So I hired based off of like, what is causing me the most pain? And so I hired a logistics manager, then found an outside consultant for accounting because things were not getting invoiced, not getting done properly. Surprise, surprise, Jesslyn's running it. Right. And we had a product that was growing relatively quickly. And then adding those key holes in our bucket was massive.
So the team, when you formally took over, and I know titles in a way don't matter. I'm kind of artificially throwing things here. I mean, you were just doing things that made it work. But when you did take over CEO in 2019, did you have a leadership team in place at that point, or is that still being built? And
that was still being built. We had a lot of outside consultants. So I had a full-time VP of sales at that point. And then I had an outside operations person. The outside accountant was more operating like that outside finance head. But over time, it started to go, okay, now I'm going to bring these people in full time. And that's really a huge key to success, because for people building their companies, because you don't have a lot of money in those early days. And my dad was not willing to give up equity. He was like, nope. Like, this is because here's the thing, like, we didn't know that was normal. We didn't have a business background to go, okay, it's time to do a raise. Okay, it's time to find an investor. Like, it was like, I put in this money and we're going to make it work. And I was like, you got it, Sarge. Yeah. Okay. So, so what we had to do, because we didn't have a huge operating budget in the early years, we had very little operating budget, was we hired the right consultants. And then once that work got to a certain point, it was time to hire them full time.
Yeah. So were you profitable by year 3 or 4? And at this point, everything could be self-funded, or have you, because you haven't had additional equity, right? So how have you funded that growth?
So we were profitable by year 3, and the company was operating on the income that it was generating. And it wasn't until last year that we got our first line of credit. And that was through a bank. And that was to help smooth out cash flow, because we were ordering multi-million bottle production orders. Like, hey, we've got to order a lot. And when you make that type of order, it sucks up cash really quick. And so the line of credit was here to help smooth that out. And that's how we funded the business to date. Now, will that be how we fund the business moving forward? Probably not, but it could be. It's worked up until this point, but typically what got you here won't necessarily get you to the next point. So I'm very open to, and my parents are very open to what that next phase looks like.
Natural progression of the business. So two final questions on this part of it, really. The first one is, what was, so you've basically, since you took over, the business has doubled or tripled in revenue, if I understand it right. So you won that first important sale with Kroger, but what has really gotten that accelerated growth in that fashion just over the last 2 or 3 years? Has it just been getting a bigger budget to pay for distributors, or you don't do a ton of advertising? So what's gotten that double or triple growth point?
It's a great question. So what has gotten us to this point is focusing on one thing, and that one thing being retail. Mm-hmm. Because if you do retail, and this is food and beverage, but if you own retail and you get into more doors and you've got product that you can see and find and easily understand in store, you've got a winner. So for us, because right there, that's sales and marketing in one place.
Yeah.
So really, we had an original bottle, right, that had a very medical label, and it was a lot of jargon, and there were chemistry structures all over it, and this, that, and the other. We made a bottle change right around this time, or a label change, right around this time that I became CEO, because I was noticing the verbal and the actual physical feedback from customers about what they were responding well to and what they were not responding well to. And I would notice that when people would come to the booth, they would pass the booth if I said, "Hi, would you like to try BioLite?" But they would come into the booth if I said, "Hi, would you like to try the IV in a bottle?"
Interesting. Right. Use those concepts. Yeah.
Yes. And people were like, what does that mean? Tell me more. Mm-hmm. So we made a label change where the IV in a bottle was smack dab in the center of the front of the bottle. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that that's retail because that's what's in retail. Mm-hmm. Whatever gets the customer to pick up your bottle and give it a try is success. So really getting the label in a better place, making sure that it was available at retail so that customers would try it. And it was able to be seen with floor stands and signage and this, that, and the other. That is how we built the business. And mm-hmm. the success that we had in Kroger, we used that story to go to QT, to go to Publix, to go to Ingles. And because you had a proof of concept with the biggest grocery retailer in the United States, mm-hmm. that they were willing to pick it up. And there's good and bad to that. There's good and bad to that because we were opening up left and right, retail location after retail location after retail location. But sooner or later, it's going, like, the chickens are going to come to roost if you're not growing in volume. But mm-hmm. because we had the right label, the right and I'm not going to say the right, but good enough label, good enough marketing, the volume maintained. But as nothing is ever stagnant in business. Everything is changing. The landscape is changing. Competitors are changing. What worked for us back in 2019 with the IV in a bottle and, the label that we've got and the marketing material that we had isn't working as well as it used to. Mm-hmm. So keeping a pulse on what is the customer asking for? Why are people picking up this product now that there's more competitors in the space? Or why are they not? And making those tweaks is key to taking it from where we got it to keeping that growth going.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's perfect. So, and thank you for walking us through that. So, and the second question I had just about that is, you do have lightning in a bottle, right? It's IV in a bottle, but lightning mm-hmm. in a bottle concept. I mean, you've proven the concept. You're profitable and you're growing quickly and rapidly. So you said you didn't start with a business plan. You just kind of stepped into doing this. What does success ultimately look like? Where do you and the family want to take this or is that still being built? I mean, you're at year 5 or 7 in the business, and that's usually an important point of inflection. You've proven it's real. Now what's next, right?
Yeah.
Can you articulate that yet?
So what I can say today is that what success looks like is owning pharmacy. So right now, when people think of when people think of like medical grade hydration, they think of Pedialyte. And that's really it. BioLite is a phenomenal medical grade hydration drink that is so needed for people like my mom when they're going through cancer, for people like yourself that plays tennis all the time and gets serious muscle cramps and you can't get rid of them. Like
I've told you about that. I use 2 bottles now every time I play.
Because it's the product is so effective for those reasons. And so we want to own the medical grade piece of hydration. And what that looks like is owning retail pharmacy in CVS and Walgreens. And if you walk into a store and you see BioLite, that is success. If you go into your cancer infusion center and the nurse is having trouble finding your veins, she gives you a bottle of BioLite. So working on that pharmacy, working on that healthcare piece and growing that is what success looks like. And from a dollars and cents perspective, as long as we are growing, and right now we're at about 22 million in revenue, but every single dollar more than that, to 30 million, to 40 million, to 50 million, to 100 million, means that we are helping more people.
Yeah. No, it's a wonderful.
Please.
No, I was gonna say it's a wonderful story. Just keep going there. You're on a roll.
No, I was just saying that because, like I mentioned before in earlier, I'm not data just doesn't get me going. Like that's not it. People get me going. And so thinking about revenue as we are helping more people, I'm like foaming at the mouth to grow this thing from 22 to 30 to 40 to 50 and beyond, because that's what this thing can be.
Well, it's awesome and it's exciting. So the last few minutes, let's just focus on you and what you've learned as a leader. I think, we've all heard of the imposter syndrome. I imagine you've probably felt it a couple of times. How did you, when you were getting started at kind of establishing your own leadership style and your own ability to lead a team, tell us just about your own growth and mindset there. Was it daunting at first, or were you just like, somebody's got to do it? How did you come to terms with it?
So I have always enjoyed leading. Mm-hmm. I was the president of my debutante club. Mm-hmm. I was the captain of the cheerleading squad. I'm sitting in the front row raising my hand in classrooms. Like I just enjoy leading. And so when it came to who was going to run this business, our former Matt Beecham, who used to work in BioLite, he ran finance for us, and he always laughed because we were on a trip to go and visit a co-packer, and he remembers me asking him, I was like, Matt, who leads a company? Like, what is the title of the person that leads a company? And he was like, that's a CEO. And I was like, oh, interesting. Okay. And you're like, so you could already start to see my wheels turning. Well, and my dad, because we talked about it, and he thought about bringing somebody else in from the outside. And I was so clear and aggressive about, I know what the problems are. I don't need somebody to come in here and tell me what the problems are. Let me tell you what the problems are, and then let me go and fix it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I've always enjoyed leading, but the journey of leading in BioLite has been through trial and error. Mm-hmm. What has worked, what has not, what got people motivated and excited and united, and what turned them off from me. What do I wear well as a leader, and what do I not? And what has not worked, and it's challenging when you're growing a company and everything is so flat in the beginning. Like a lot of people that were with me in the early days, we still have a few that are hanging on, and I'm very grateful for that. But a lot of people have not with the company anymore because they struggled with, okay, now that we have some serious dollars that we're making and we need to create a structure, somebody needs to kind of go to the top. So if something goes wrong, somebody needs to ultimately be responsible. And so what didn't work was when we got to a certain point was keeping everything flat. And so that was challenging. And that was challenging for me to have those fierce conversations and not try to be the homecoming queen. And now I'm wearing that a lot better than I did before. I'm not doing it perfect at all. But what I think I do well from a leadership perspective is not only just motivating and getting people excited. That's just comes second nature. But what I do well is read the room, where if somebody comes into my office and, we've got a list of things to talk about, and I can just tell something is wrong. Like I will straight up, I don't care about whatever is on that list. Talk to me about what's happening. And I think that the listening ear, the wanting my people to be happy has been, I think that's motivated a lot of the team members, especially the ones that have stayed.
Yeah. What's been the hardest decision you've had to make then as CEO since 2019?
The hardest decision that I've had to make was, it's like a soup kitchen of problems that we have had to address in 2020 and 2023. You're talking about a year when cash flow was an issue. We had too many people on staff. They didn't have the right leadership. They didn't have the right direction. They didn't have the right goals. And so, like, for example, we started with hundreds of thousands of dollars by June. Like at the end of June, we were in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. And I nipped and tucked and tweaked and did everything that I could to get that back in line. And now at the end of this year, we're going to be a little bit profitable.
Yeah. Really.
It's just, what's the hardest decision that you've ever had to make? I think it was just the tidal wave of slugging it out this year with so many tough decisions coming at once. Like there was a week when 3 people quit.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was on top of, I thought I was dealing with this issue with us having too much inventory or not having enough. We've had both of those this year. And then 2 people quit. And so the hardest decision was just managing the tidal wave to right the ship.
Right. And I know you've had to scale back some people too. Like you said, you had excess capacity. So that's always hard.
Well, and I want to be very clear. They are great people. It was not a people problem. It was, we didn't know what to do with all these people. Yeah. We doubled in headcount. We went from like 20 something to close to 50 at a point in time. But when we did that, we didn't have a strategy. We didn't have accountability. We didn't have a structure for them to be successful.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you kind of learned that in retrospect, right?
Oh, absolutely. And to where now we don't make a hire, like, because before I had a misconception that hiring and your head count was indicators of success, because everybody is like, what'd you go to? Like, you went from this to this. Oh, that's wonderful. You get an award for that. Like, but that's not necessarily what's best for your business.
Yeah.
It was not, it wasn't the best for mine.
Yeah. That's a great insight. Well, last question on that, did you, ultimately, who are best sources of advice for you, right? Other entrepreneurs learn from other entrepreneurs. sometimes a company has a board of directors that they've got in place. I don't know if you guys have got a board yet in place, but who's been, you don't have to give specific names, but who has helped you see around corners to avoid, a bad decision?
100% Vistage. So Vistage is a group of CEOs and presidents that run $100 million companies, $5 million companies, $10 million companies, $1 million companies that are all in the room together, slugging it out, talking about issues, talking about problems. And Vistage has also given me a coach. Her name is Aviva Womer. So she leads our Vistage group, and she's like my personal sounding board. And
awesome?
If I am ever in like a, SHIT moment, I am like,
she's on speed dial.
Oh my God. She is like, she's on speed dial, and I don't call her often. So when I do, we talking about it. We talking about some stuff. So that's been really helpful. And I think that it has completely and totally accelerated my growth. And I actually got Vistage. No, it wasn't. It was around 2020. And so I think that has also helped with the growth.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I we'll plug Vistage. I've got a Vistage group too, and just a great leader and a great group of people, and they are awesome. They're great sounding boards, and they're kind of, for me, just kind of that informal board of directors. So great to hear that. Well, last question for you. I mean, so it's just been such a great, exciting journey, thrills and chills that we like to say for you, over this 7 years under your leadership for BioLite. When you look back, is there one nugget you wish you had known then that would have made things so much better now? Anything there?
Yes. What I would love to say to myself back in the day is, Jess, you don't need to go to a master's program because you're going to learn so much information that you don't need, but you are aware of what you're not good at. Like, you're aware that you need help in finance, that you need help in cash flow management. Go and take a few classes specifically on those things that you're not good at. Because if you don't, they're going to handicap you at a certain point.
That's great insight. In fact, I would say, that shows you it's a weakness, and it shows you what you don't know so that you can at least find the right people to help you address that.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Jesslyn, this has been awesome. Thank you very much. I love these sessions. You've done a great job taking BioLite. I'm using building BioLite as a business. I appreciate what your mom and dad have started there. Like I said, I use it, and I look forward to continuing to follow your journey.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Awesome. Okay, we'll talk soon.
See ya. Bye.
Hello, welcome back to the studio. Cannon and Claudia here with you. Claudia, this was just such a fun episode, right? We expected it to be great, and it was. We'll provide the 3 or 4 takeaways, that we often do after our shows. But first, just what struck you as interesting or something compelling in the show that you liked?
Yeah, I loved her self-awareness. She always recognized what her strengths and weaknesses were, and was very transparent about that fact. And I think that it's really helped her be as successful as she has been with BioLite.
Absolutely. She really knew her strengths and weaknesses, and she was comfortable with that. But she describes in her journey about how she evolved in mindset. And we'll talk about that in a moment too, because there is growth in the leader, as you see, is over that 7-year period. Well, maybe we'll just leave everyone with 3 quick takeaways. The first thing that really struck me about just the BioLite story was how this is a great product that solves a need in the market, but the leadership team is not so enamored with the product that they miss the important opportunities to make it successful as a business. And that's so important for entrepreneurs to understand, solving a problem for a meaningful segment.
Right. Absolutely. Well, and then continuing to know your goal and know what segment you want to own. Even at the end, she talks about wanting to own the medical grade hydration and growing its success, and that she really sees that's where BioLite has its biggest opportunities.
Absolutely. So keeping that in mind, knowing where you want to head and solve a problem there. But even going back to the very early part of that story, she, this product started just by hydrating her mom as her mother was going through the side effects of chemo, and her dad developed that product. But they grew it into a broader segment with IV in a bottle concept, but just solving that problem and enabling it to, if it's meaningful enough to a big enough segment, grow into the retail channel and the pharmacy channel. It's just such an important thing to keep in mind. So we just thought that was great. The second thing to think about a little bit was just how this really is a playbook for building a business from scratch around what is a great product. But in building that business, certainly being in tune with the market, which was that first point we made. And you can see a couple steps along the way in this playbook. Early, Jesslyn talked about how she had an internal bias for loving this product. And I love that point. She was like, I got to make sure that bias isn't going to get in the way of success. And they went out and they did some deep research in the market.
Absolutely. And I love this. They went to high school athletes to validate their products and make sure that it was working and that the general public would also like their products, which I think was a great strategy.
Exactly. I mean, so she found athletes were needing this product for recovery, for hydration, and better than just, the other competing products that are out there. This one seemed to have a specific need. And I love how even years later, this mindset continued, how she attributed their retail success to observing and understanding why customers are picking up BioLite off the shelf, right? And then making sure they're in tune with that. They only had to tweak the ingredients of the product by, about 10%, but but why are customers buying this and understanding why? And that constant feedback loop, it was just so important. So I thought that was cool. As an aside, we talk about sometimes luck and opportunism weighs in, and she shared an interesting story about kombucha.
Yeah, I loved this one and how the kombucha wasn't shelf stable or even refrigerated stable. And so they had a gap in the shelves and they put BioLite in, and it helped so much.
It did. And so timing's everything. And could you say that's luck? I mean, in reality, it's not luck. You create your own luck. And we often say, if you're an athlete, you try to stay in the game, just stay in the game, keep playing your game to look for those opportunities because they will present. And they were ready. Yeah. And they were aware. They connected and jumped on it. And I just think it's a great story. In continuing this playbook idea, Jesslyn talked about when they finally hit that stage of growth where they needed to start hiring. It was more than just her selling out of the back of the Toyota. She needed to hire a team.
Right. And this goes back to that self-awareness that I talked about, how much I loved at the beginning, is that she knew where her skill gaps were. And that's where she started building first, which I think is so important for every entrepreneur to know, is that build that team where you are lacking the skills.
Exactly. And so that got them started. And, just as a sidebar, I just thought later in the interview, we talked about how growth showed that even a flat organization, they needed to start hiring more. And it was interesting that Jesslyn at first was thinking hiring people is a sign of success. I mean, the external world rewards you for that, right? How many employees do you have? You must be growing. That must be great. And she learned a little bit the hard way that actually can be some mistakes, right? And she talked about how they hired too many at some point, and it weren't that they were bad people. It was that just people weren't aligned and they didn't have an accountability structure in place. They weren't necessarily strategically aligned. And they needed to go through that painful process of right sizing. And that's just some important lesson to learn there in that journey. And then finally, you'd already made the point, but in terms of playbook, they do know where they're headed and going from retail into owning the medical grade segment of hydration in the pharmacy channel. Right. And you made that great point earlier in the show. Maybe the third thing that I just thought was just so wonderful here to keep in mind and learn from is the mindset that Jesslyn has as a young family member who took the reins as CEO and earned the role and has been growing that role and growing the business so successfully. And she really shows you a great playbook there. And one of her first comments she said, or one of her comments that I just thought was she said along the way was, what got you here at any stage of the business is not necessarily what will get you to the next level. And that mindset and that awareness is mature and important to keep in mind for entrepreneurs. And then as you mentioned, her passion is a key to her mindset. She convinced her dad early that she wanted to be CEO of this company and could lead it. With Kroger, I know you had talked about that too.
Yeah, I think that Kroger story is so fun, that the distributors doubted that she would actually be able to sell to Kroger, but her passion, her enthusiasm, and her optimism about the product really sold it to Kroger. And then she was able to sell to distributors, giving her all of the reach that BioLite has today. It's
such a great point. They invested in her energy. You remember she said, I think Kroger representative talked about it being water. She's like, oh, the product's not water, but he invested in her. And, her passion too comes through, and this is all about helping people.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it's less about data, less about revenue. Those are important metrics, but it's ultimately about helping people. And that's what drives the success of the business. And then maybe just a final point on the mindset, just that willingness of trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, she knows her strengths and weaknesses. I think she has a good sense of what the company's strengths and weaknesses are.
Mm-hmm.
And trial and error is so key to figuring out what's working about the product in the market, what's working as a business and not, and how do you get there? And she said, in a way, being family owned, and it gives some flexibility to figure out those things that you don't know.
Right.
And figuring out why customers buy and how, employees are involved in those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, just knowing what you're good at. You'd mentioned that earlier. So she's very aware on that front. So, and that's the key to her being a success as CEO.
Absolutely.
So, well, this was a great program, a great show. I think so many great lessons in it. So, Claudia, thanks for helping me think through it. And we hope everyone enjoyed the show.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.